Welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude, and we're here to talk about our really great guests' career maps and their personal board of advisors. Reminder that the career map is where we're actually documenting the past, present, and future of our journeys professionally in 5 different dimensions. The jobs and roles that we held, the skills along the way, some of the education and certifications, our accomplishments, and a little bit of the fun stuff. And once we have that little bit of a plan, we can then share it with those multiple guides, support system that we develop along the way, multiple mentors, our personal board. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the show. This will be posted on LinkedIn and the other podcast platforms. So please give a listen, give a follow, subscribe, and comment whenever there's a certain piece along the way that really resonates with you. Our guest today, favorite quote, it's Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. It's a little bit longer, so give me a chance to read it. And any of my basketball fans out there, Coach Carter reference, right? Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, amazing? Actually, who are you not to be? Playing small does not serve the world. We are all meant to shine. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. Zane Zumbahlen is our guest today. 25 years as a career in HR at IBM, 4 years as a CHRO in healthcare, most recently, HR leader in a finance fintech world, happily married for 20 years, and he has 2 kids in their teen-ish years. One of the fun facts that I'll share about this other tall guy in HR that enjoys speaking to groups is that in 2024, he completed a half marathon, and in 2025, he has committed to running a full. So without further ado, our guest today, getting ready to run a marathon, Zane, welcome to the Pathfinders podcast.
Pete, when you said the quote, I got chills. The enthusiasm you put into it was awesome. Thank you. I mean, I believe it's so true. I mean, we've got to embrace it. We've got to take risk, and we've just got to drive into sometimes the unknown and play our biggest game. So thanks for sharing the quote.
I love it. It's a special one for me. And I actually never knew where it came from. I thought for whatever reason that it came from the Coach Carter basketball movie because,
it's perfectly applied to the movie.
It's something that we've actually shared with our players, right? Me as a coach of a high school basketball team, and particularly at certain points in the season, it resonates more than others. But we're not here to talk about my basketball coaching career. We're here to talk about you, Zane, and tell us, when you're growing up, what was it that you wanted to be as an adult?
I wanted to be an astronaut. I love space. So I get geeked out by black holes and quasars and Stephen Hawking, and it's just the stuff I like to follow. So that was the dream as a kid, and still a passion of mine.
Very cool. Have you ever been able to act on that? Did you go to astronaut school? Did you meet any astronauts? Did you go to space by chance?
I have not gone to space. I will, because it's getting cheaper and we can go and float. So it was $100,000 a couple of years ago. It'll get down. So before my time expires, I will be somehow in space. I've been to Cape Canaveral. I've followed the missions. So I've done a variety of things, but I haven't gone to space yet. So we'll see where that leads.
All right. So did you study something along spatial exploration in college? How far did that dream continue?
It's called organic chemistry.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. Yeah.
So I was going towards engineering in college, and I hit an organic chem was a required class at University of Illinois, and man, it was more than a deterrent. It was a roadblock through which I really had trouble getting. So that's when I started to rethink, do I want more of an applied science or more of a, mental conceptual? I went into psychology and then organizational behavior and then HR.
Okay. So it's pretty much, HR from astronauts. It's the same thing. So coming out of school, what was the first job title that you had, whether it was in alignment with that degree or not?
First job, first job?
First one, yeah.
First one. I walked beans when I was 13 years old.
No, out of school, past that one.
I was like, really? Because that's when I knew I did not want manual labor. So out of school, I was an HR generalist for IBM.
Okay.
So I was doing benefits administration.
Okay. Now let's think about the things that not only went into your toolbox, but stayed in your toolbox from those college years and in that first role, right? A big piece of the career map are some of those skills, achievements, accomplishments along the way.
Sure.
So let's think about those experiential and lesson filled, literally figuratively, academic years, but we also weave in that first piece. What stayed in your toolbox from those times?
So I had the most amazing mentor at Michigan State, Don Power, and he passed away a couple of years ago. But he was a professor at MSU, and I went to him one day, and he became a friend. He over time he became a friend, but he was a mentor. And I went to him, and I was frustrated about another class where it was contemporary labor relations, something like that, and we were looking at stuff that was 15 to 20 years dated. And I said, "There's nothing contemporary about what we're doing." And he looked at me and he said, "So what are you going to do about it?" I'm like, "Well, we're talking about a peer professor of yours. I don't know what I can do about it." And he said, "I find it very interesting on who you think the consumer is." So I had to think about that. I'm like, it is my tuition. So I took it upon myself, and I went and I had a conversation with the professor. That didn't necessarily go well. However, from that, we created an external forum. I invited a labor attorney, a management attorney. We had 40 people attend. The Dunlop Forum. So we created this thing where we actually got attorneys representing both employees and labor, got them into a really good discussion, an awkward agreement, a discontent. I mean, it was the most wonderful kind of self-initiated effort. So, but let me put the meaning and message behind it. It was always look at, what position I have and the influence I can create from where I'm at, and never think that I am beholden to other parties that be. I can always create and advocate for some form of change.
Mm-hmm. Tell me now, why the heck HR?
So I really enjoyed psychology, and especially, OI, organizational industrial. And I had a friend who said, I get your interest and enjoyment behind that, but you do so much with people. Have you ever thought about human resources?
Mm-hmm.
So in all candor, I hadn't. But I looked into it and it felt right. But I'll tell you what, when I went to Michigan State, 15 minutes into my very first class, it was also Don Power as the professor. He made us think, and I was like, God, I could do this for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So it was taking, a science interest to, how can I use psychology and blend it with people? And like I said, 15 minutes and I knew I was hooked.
Okay. So you're at IBM, right? Small mom and pop shop. And I'm guessing that what?
Tiny.
Yeah, see, maybe they've grown a little bit since then. And you probably moved around a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about transitioning from that first role to your second role in the organization. That can be one or two of the most pivotal ones, right? We don't know a whole lot. Maybe we weren't like you and had 17 jobs before we graduated college, right? All that experience and knowledge, wisdom packed in there. But why did you make that transition? And were there people that helped guide you, asking you questions? Maybe you bounced some ideas off them. Maybe you went back to Don.
So I did. So I'd gone, from an HR benefits administration, what I was doing was spending a lot of time with telephony and how we were routing our calls in our employee services center. So that first transition from benefits administration to telephony, I kind of took a turn towards IT. And then kind of my management team came to me and said, you have a decision to make. Do you want to stay down an IT track? And I had friends who did, or do you want to come back into the fold of HR? So I re-entered HR and ended up taking a move. As attractive as it sounds, it was desirable at the time, Fishkill, New York. So I moved from Raleigh, North Carolina up to Fishkill and took a job as kind of a recruiter and an HR generalist, a junior HR generalist. So it helped me round out from, the call center and the, benefits administration into how do we really actually start to touch our client set.
Okay. And if we look at the, 2.5 decades at IBM, what do you think were some of the most influential experiences that you had? Some of those roles that you filled along the way that you're like, dang, this is a piece where sure, my timeline on my career map was linear, but the amount of, experience and helpfulness almost looked like a exponential spike, right? It was some of those springboard experiences and opportunities on your journey.
If I take a little liberty with the question, I had a really interesting experience when I was in Fishkill as an HR generalist. I had a very hard career conversation with my manager at the time and a low performance appraisal. And I'll tell you, that was more influential than I care to admit. I didn't agree in the moment, and I ended up having to take some soul searching through the weekend. And the realization on Sunday night before I came back on Monday was that the feedback I'd gotten, which was, you don't know the business, you haven't gotten close enough to your client, you're not making the impact you need to have. The realization on Sunday night was that he was right. And I had to come back in and figure out how to fix that. And so I'm a proponent of giving honest, candid feedback, maybe even especially when it's negative, because that inflection point changed the totality of my career. So he said, maybe this isn't something you could do. A week later, he said, maybe this isn't something you could do. There's a job in San Diego. If you'd like to go to it, I think you'd be perfect for it. It's, project management. And I couldn't leave a job thinking that I had failed at it or couldn't be successful. So I turned that down and I dug in, and and I learned the business. I got close with the client set, and in 6 months, I went back to my manager and he said, listen, it's time for you to move, but I will give you kudos and credos for what you've done, because the feedback from the client is totally different than where it started. So that was one. I had a role in biz dev. So we were doing mergers and acquisitions, and the need for a background in the business and how you align with the role and the function being done, as well as compensation and retention, and then the trade-offs that you make across finance and real estate and everything else. The business maturation that happened in that year and a half was huge. So anytime you can do a biz dev job and get engaged in mergers and acquisitions, it's so valuable, because you have to know the depth of your business as well as how to make the trade-offs to make it work for the company.
And if it's biz dev, you have to be able to, eat food and golf and talk to people, right? There's sometimes a little bit of fun right? A little bit of fun that comes with some of the rev gen.
That wasn't my experience, but I'm sure it's possible. We were going fast and furious. I mean, we were doing a number of small acquisitions and then some larger ones. We were doing some smaller divestitures. It was so much and so fast. It was amazing to be part of it. I mean, we were acquiring Price Waterhouse at the time. We were divesting, to Hitachi, to Lenovo. It was a little bit of everything.
And so through the biz dev M&A work, you still made your way through HR, and kind of talk to us about the final chapter with IBM. Where were you situated there, sitting, hanging out? You're there. You're one of the senior people. Now, we know the larger organizations, there's probably a couple of folks hiding in different corners that have been there 40, 50 years, right? But from a macro level, looking at the averages, you're getting to the top of the food chain, right? Pretty successful.
So the last job I had at IBM was the IBM acquisition of Red Hat, and I was the HR acquisition integration leader, working with Delissa Alexander from Red Hat, and how could we find the value of IBM and leverage that for the benefit of Red Hat and whatever synergies could exist at the time. But but I'll tell you, I mean, between that, I had I had an international assignment in Sweden on an acquisition integration. I spent 3 years in Japan as the CHRO for IBM Japan, and that was amazing. But Pete, I'll tell you, I managed my career in IBM through a matrix. So on the x-axis, I had the functions within HR. On the y-axis, I had the business units in IBM, and I always wanted to be expanding my aperture. So I don't think there's any such thing as a career model or career map anymore. I think it's a career lattice. I think we've got to manage it ourselves. So I would do a generalist role and then a different specialist. And then go back to a generalist, and I'd be changing business units each time so I could have the most diversified background as possible through my time at IBM. And then if I threw a third axis or a Z axis on there, I was always trying to support a different leader or a different leadership style so I could be learning new and better people across the business. So that matrix really helped me think through how to be the best I could be.
Zane's matrix. I love it. So then at the end of the time at IBM, you've done a lot of really interesting work, right? Building the business, growing the business, integrating other pieces of other businesses to the mothership, if you will. But then you said, hey, I'm going to go to healthcare, right? What did somebody pull you away? Because this is another big piece. We talked earlier about the transition from first job to second job, but what about from company one to company two? And this is something for the folks listening, right? Maybe you're mid-career and been at an organization for 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And you're thinking, is this the right thing for me? So what's going through your head at that point in time? You probably could always go back, right? You build so many great relationships and of those, 10 or 20 people across the, small firm, right? But talk with us through that decision-making process. Yes. You pulled, you pushed, what did it look like?
I mean, IBM is amazing and gave me an amazing background and foundation. I was lucky enough to have the job in IBM Japan as the head of HR. I came back and when I did and was supporting Red Hat and looking at, how could I help their CHRO and find the synergies, I was helping her do the job that I'd had in Japan, and she's amazing. And as is her predecessor, who's a friend of mine from Michigan State. But I was helping, and it was the job that I had in Japan and I knew I wanted. So it gave me a chance to start looking around. So, I got a little creative. It was CTCA was like so Cancer Treatment Centers of America was where I was the head of HR. It was like a gift. So it was a company. So I lost my dad to lung cancer. So, and I grew up in Central Illinois, and they're founded out of the Chicago area. So Zion, so it was a company with whom I was familiar when I was young. And it had a personal, emotional appeal to me, a chance to give back to something that had impacted my family and impact so many families, right? So, I had a really good conversation with Dr. Pat Basu, who was the CEO at the time, and things started to click, and it really felt like the right move for me to make. I'll tell you the other thing about CTCA, so Cancer Treatment Centers of America, which has now been acquired by City of Hope, so there's a lot in transition here, but their motto is the mother standard of care. And, the easy interpretation is treat every patient as if a member of family. And man, I fell in love hard and fast. It was just, it was a place that was really easy to align with the purpose and passion of the organization.
And that's kind of whenever you and I first met up in New York, was that as the most recent experience, right? Yeah. And talking about some of the work we've both done in the healthcare realm. But whenever you meet Zane in person, you feel that, right? He walks the walk, talks the talk. And that was one of the first things is, treat that's what we do, right? Mm-hmm. Treat every patient as if a family member. Yeah. And so different kind of environment, different kind of organization. did you have mentors from the last company that were still guiding you at this one? Talk to us a little bit about your board of advisors, those few folks guiding you whenever you transition, and you're at still a high level leadership role. So a lot of times people come to me and be, Pete, I'm at the top of the food chain right now. I don't know that I need this PBA, personal board, to guide me. I'm all taken care of. And I usually say, okay, that's fine. You probably don't need a personal board. Is there anybody that you can consult advice whenever you're going through a big Yeah, sure. Is there anybody that you bounce ideas off? I'm like, you definitely don't have a personal board. No way. We're not. No. But talk to us in your experience. What'd that look like, Zane?
So IBM has a number of people who have now become CHROs or CPOs across companies. So I'm privileged enough to have a bunch of friends. Annette Favorite, Vicky Creamer, Denise Williams. The list goes on and on and on. Horst Gallo. So I called all of them. I reached out and said, so it was funny. In Japan, I had a prepared speech. So I was waiting for somebody to come in and say, you have no clue what you're doing. And it was going to start with, you're exactly right, but here's what I'm doing to learn. I had a similar speech ready for being a CHRO, but I called 15 friends who were in CHRO roles who'd left IBM that I could leverage for a resource or support or help or advice. So that was my PBA. It still is. In fact, I was just connected with one of them on LinkedIn earlier today. So it's a really good group from which to draw. And so the other thing is I figured out who were the game changers in CTCA and how can we start to partner to help lead and drive the organization the way it needs to go. So, the COO at the time, we ended up having basically a daily meeting at 11 p.m. That's what time worked for us. So we would somehow reconvene, and that's where we would brainstorm and kind of think through, how are things going? Where do we need to head and drive? And what can we do to move for the future?
Okay. And then when did this speaking work come into play, right? Before we got on here, you talked about a couple of different instances, domestic, internationally. You're, pretty decent. People keep asking you to come back, but where did this kind of spark from?
Let's see. What I realized early in my career was that ego was my greatest enemy. If I adopted it, it invariably hurt me. From that, I then stretched into vulnerability. So, and vulnerability, actually, I'll give you one of the first speaking engagements was with a bunch of millennials. And I talked about what I shared earlier, getting one of the lowest performance appraisals in IBM. And to share that, because I was in a VP role at the time, to share that with relative new hires. And they were saying, wow, we didn't know, thank you. We didn't know that you could take a setback like that and still continue to thrive and achieve. So it was the realization that vulnerability wasn't necessarily weakness, but really an asset. And where could I employ that vulnerability both inside the company as well as outside? And have that facilitate a really good discussion and let people know that they're not alone in where they're at, what they're doing, or with which they've struggled. And the more I've shared, the more it seems to resonate with people. So it kind of started with vulnerability and has been fruitful for me. It's, I lend myself to the talks and whatever I do. And in doing so, I get a lot of really good conversations afterwards and some great ideas. I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I do want to be the most, flexible and adaptable. So I'll throw ideas out and then they'll get beaten up and I'll just, I'll be amorphous and I'll be like a sponge and I'll grab all of that to try to come up with the best ideas.
All right. So you're doing your marathon in 25. When's the book coming out?
I don't know. I'm going to enlist you in my PBA because I need some help figuring that one out. So maybe we'll see.
But let's talk about that a little bit more. Whenever we got to meet, we had a chance to talk a little bit about the Pathfinders book, right? We got a little bit into the career map, personal board methodology. Let's talk about that from an organizational perspective, right? Where do you, right? HR leader with a couple of different, organizations along the way, surrounded by some rock star HR leaders. Where do you see the value to an organization when it comes to giving that ability to our people, to our workforce, to put together a career map, career lattice, to visualize things, and then to have the more than one mentor support system?
So give me the question again so I can answer it in the best way possible.
Value to the organization of giving each employee a career map and guiding them to build their own PBA.
Thanks for the repeat. It's fundamentally crucial that anybody in any organization can see a path for themselves and their future there. If you go back to COVID, and we've got such a propensity to move and pivot off of fear rather than hope or aspiration. When we have gaps in our thought process, we fill it with fear far too quickly. So where you've got a career map, where you've got a lattice, where you've got those resources, it fills the gap. And instead of fear, you're thinking about opportunity or possibility. So to have a personal board, to have a couple of people that you can lean on and rely on, so I had a mentoring conversation with one more junior person in FIS today. I've got another one tomorrow. So I try to get back frequently and be that sounding board for people, or that coach or mentor. So where you've got the map, the lattice, and the resources that you can lean upon, it gives you so much opportunity to look to the company and the future of the company. I think it improves engagement, it improves retention, and I think in general is just really a valuable asset for everybody to have.
It's something that a lot of us talk about, and whenever we can take action, right? Whether it's, small, medium, large implementations, hey, let's act on this piece. Zane, I have a couple of notes over here. I'll read through a quick recap. But if there's a closing tip that you want to share with some of our listeners here, we'll keep this to less than 47 minutes, your closing tip. This is not a full keynote, but if you have a closing tip or piece of advice that you'd like to share to some of the listeners.
So there's one that I thought of recently, and I'm going to borrow from my daughter, and so I'll say it in context because it's funny, and then I'll switch it. So, this has not been applied to me, but my daughter has a propensity for going, that person is so extra. So I don't want to be.
Hold on. Congratulations on you not falling into that seat yet. We'll see.
We'll see. But if I think about us and the opportunity we have as HR leaders, there are times when we have to do exactly that. We have to be extra. We have to be extra to set the tone. So if I want to create an organization that takes strategic risk, I have to fail, and I have to show and talk about failure. If I want more openness, then I have to show and be vulnerable. If I want more business acumen, then I have to talk about financials. In my opinion, we have to figure out the extra that we need, and then be exactly that. Be extra so as to elicit and drive the change for what we're trying to accomplish for the company with whom we're working, or the organization where we're playing.
So, Zane, thanks for joining us on Pathfinders today. I'm going to go through a little bit of a recap. Starting off with, our biggest fear is not that we've not yet been to space or that we limit our career lattice, but our ego as the greatest enemy, or maybe being extra. Growing up, he wanted to go to space himself, right? And maybe after his marathon, and in some kind of order, he'll get to be an astronaut of sorts. He studied engineering, transitioned into psych and HR at Michigan State, and you provided a thank you to your late mentor, Don Power. It's what position you have and what influence you can create that really inspired you and drove you. We heard that a few times. You shared the story of how you fell into HR, but not far from IO and science with the people aspect. From Ben admin work to IT and back to HR, Michigan to North Carolina and New York, in the bustling metropolis of Fishkill. Heart was hurt, and the heart to heart was heard, and it was hard, but you were motivated. You dug in, you turned down San Diego, you worked from that feedback, and that helped rocket ship your career forward to biz dev with M&A, Japan, Sweden. And pretty cool to hear about your last stop at IBM was the HR integration lead, right, of the Red Hat piece. No small task. You gave back to your Chicagan roots. I don't know if you say a Chicagan or not, but Chicagan roots, leading HR and people with CTCA, the City of Hope. So the goal there, treat every patient as if a family member, really stuck with you. As you're going through this, right, calling your 15 friends that left you from IBM, but on a serious note, they helped guide you before, during, after this transition. You also shared that vulnerability wielded right is an asset, not a weakness. There's a need to see a path for growth. The career map, the career lattice, it fills the gap, forfeiting fear. So thank you, Zane, for sharing this, and good luck as you keep going towards that next finish line.